Over the last few years, there's been a change in politics in many democracies. It seemed that progress towards the realization of full rights for women may now have stalled or even be going backwards. Here, we saw the incomes of women growing strongly for a period. It now appears this is no longer the case. If you look at the rates of sexual offences against women in the crime statistics released on Friday, you can see we still haven't made nearly enough progress. Pregs Govender is a senior affiliate at the Africa Gender Institute, also runs a podcast called Love and Insubordination. Pregs, good afternoon to you. What do you mean by love and insubordination?
Hi, Stephen. It emerges from the book I'd written after I'd resigned from Parliament, after being the only MP to oppose the arms deal in the defence budget vote when it came into effect. And it's about the idea that it emerges from the idea and learnings from people who've resisted oppressive systems in our country against the patriarchal capitalist apartheid state. There was resistance to its subordination, the way in which it subordinated oppressed peoples, including women. And so the idea is that our insubordination is to unjust systems, and love is a bit like the first founding value of our Constitution, which is inherent dignity, which is, together with equality and social justice, the values on which our Constitution is built. And the idea there is that it's inherent. Dignity in our Constitution is described as inherent. It's our birthright. Every single child is born with this. And so it's about how to reclaim that in a world which dehumanizes people. And in different ways, through war economies, through ideological systems, whether it's education or the media or religion. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Tutu's story about, they came with the gun in one hand and the Bible in the other, and they left with the land, and we kept the Bible. So it's about how we are insubordinate to all forms of injustice. And for women, it's particularly important.
It's interesting because putting that into practice, I mean, I appreciate what you say about the role of the media, for example, the role of the economy. Fighting against that can be quite tough. I mean, I don't need to tell you how strong a force capitalism is.
Absolutely, and it's critical because I think if we look at the way in which what we're seeing now, your two stories that you had before and during this interview, the issue of guns, the issue of weapons, and the amount of money that the arms industry makes globally, and the way in which those wars are needed, whether those wars are fought across geographic boundaries or they're fought within homes and communities. That should not be our priority. But it is. If you look at global spending on military spending, it's shot through the roof. The US, for example, has found all the money to be able to drop bombs on Palestinians, the majority of whom they've killed are children and women, and don't have money for healthcare or food. There are about, I think, at last count, I can't remember, but it's over, I think it's about 28 million people across the U.S. Living in poverty. I think it's a global system. It's not just in our country, and we see what the priorities of that system are and how important it is to understand how everything, the world produces enough food to feed everyone, including in our country. And women spend a huge amount of time trying to provide food, trying to nourish their children. Because of gendered roles, this is something that should be something that everyone, men and women, and the entire society should be responsible for. But I think our economies are not geared to the well-being of the people of our country. It's not geared to give effect to constitutional rights like land or food or education or housing or healthcare. So it's the global economy, and I think this is in capitalism in all our countries, is geared towards making maximum profits for a small number of people, a small number of billionaires.
And
so whether it's in Ukraine and, the IMF before the Ukraine war, the IMF had one of the part of the agreement to giving the loan to the Ukraine's government was that they deregulate gas, and they also deregulate the agricultural farms. The cost of food and the cost of heating went up exponentially going into winter. The number of old people who died and children who were affected was huge. So, if economic policy is geared towards ensuring the well-being of more people, it looks very different. You won't find so many guns and so many bombs.
Pregs, you talk about love, and I sometimes think we don't talk about love enough in our politics and our society. But in a way, it seems to me that love is in a constant battle with lust, and a lust for power. And I think of some of the people who men who make sexist remarks and get away with it. Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil is one, Donald Trump in the United States is another. But is there a sort of one opposing the other here, a sort of love on the one side and a kind of lust for power on the other? It's the lust for power that creates artificial famines.
I think we've had, the issue of words and language is really seen by what people actually do. That's the test. And so, we've just had Valentine's Day, and too many women know about getting roses and getting a beating at the same time. And the issue really is about how do you change the way human beings relate to each other, and that cannot be decontextualized from the way power relates across all layers of society. So you can't. We in Parliament, for example, when I was chairing the Committee on Women, we ensured that laws such as the Domestic Violence Act were enacted, and child maintenance was enacted, etc. But if you have a system that is built on violence, that is built on success is measured by, being able to make the biggest amount of money as quickly as possible, to exploit and to oppress people. It doesn't matter how you make your money. And often it's about that exploitation. The entire system and the way power operates at every level is important. So, for example, we had great laws such as laws to protect women workers' rights in the workplace. But if companies do as they do in our country and across the world, and this is both local and global companies, if they work a way around the laws to make sure that the kinds of jobs they are destroying, jobs that are secure, that are well paid, that have good working conditions, and replace those jobs with precarious jobs where people don't know whether they're going to have work from one season to the next. They don't know if they're going to have work from 1 month to the next. And the working conditions are poor. The health and safety conditions are poor. And there's not enough money within government to be able to have the kind of inspectors in terms of labor inspection across the country. And what happens and how do you actually make sure that those who bypass the laws are held accountable? So we have a great deal of, illegal financial flows, not just in our country, but across the continent. And the way in which the impact of that on people's lives, on women's lives, if women are taking, if you have our country is still dealing with the a legacy that's not just an apartheid legacy, but a colonial legacy of the apartheid spatial geography in our country. And that means that people who are walking through dark, unlit streets, or taking transport late at night after precarious work, they're very vulnerable to gender-based violence. And we know that gender-based violence increases during times of war, during times of conflict. So, in the States, for example, there was a point at which the state would provide femicide statistics. They no longer do that because it went went completely off the roof between the Gulf Wars. And we insisted in South Africa that when we came to Parliament, that we must collect disaggregated statistics and information. And that's really important because it gives you a sense of what is happening and to whose lives change.
Pregs, Govender, thank you. Senior affiliate at the Africa Gender Institute. The podcast is called Love and Insubordination. Do appreciate the time.